scale. Process every location, metric meters, and miles, and lines communicates to a system. This opts you into yards. In lines of communication setting, it puts you into your centimeters, your location setting, your decimals, and location of travel, how you modify your lines, letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, put you in position locations, how you see it through a periodical table, or how you modify your settings and send travel. But it puts all communications into the 7-dimensional center. That puts all position of the body. It's always in the presence of its system. So in that positions, it puts every locations where the physical body has to trigger stand the openings of its grounds of 24 seconds. That puts every location light and dark and light. Direct and redirect processes communication setting and to see it through its flights, its manifolds, and location of travel, and know exactly to live the intergalactic beam of 7-dimensional layers of travel itself. So that modifies the pyramid activation line operates signals in 42 streamings and 24 grounds in positions of 024 and process lines and outline signals into, once you reach lines of 024, you're dealing with the mind conceptual setting of operation itself. That modifies everything to its portals of set position with setting through its stargates and operation system, all through Merkaba, Tesseract, and tetrahedron. So it's really interesting how it comes in that positions, knowing exactly how to see myself in a 7-dimensional setting in a 24 clocking system, 24 operations, 24 line signals, and lines of pi. That 42 lines operation centers of travels of platforms, lines of 4 zeros of operation, and 3 centers of scale of communication. 3 over lines of 4. So that leads to female polarity to male polarity. In process lines of setting, 3 plus 4 equals 7 operations, 7-dimensional and operation setting, 7-dimensional system. So that puts the scale of communication setting and process at 144 flux of travel. Okay, so it modifies the settings into 4 grounds, into 0 operations, 1, 2, 3, and set positions. They equalize your polarities and travel communication setting and process directions into its grounds, where the physical body has to understand how to go through the 7-dimensional layers of travel. Okay, knowing how to get in position, location, setting to the system of walking, in position of floating, flying, and levitating all at once in set position. Now, once I understand its 4 generation lines of setting, which is 4 zeros of operation, then it processes lines of truth narrative to the false narrative. The false narrative is the process lines of foundation, 3 equals lines of void, which is the vast volume. The mass is everything to its equation, which is travels and communication system, which is the negative. Okay, so it's negative over pi, and then pi goes over negative. So you have to understand direct and redirect the process setting of 7-dimensional layers that you go through and travel. So that converts the settings of 3 angles in process communications. Okay. So that process your direct centers. You add 3 lines of signals, putting it together in modification grounds of operation through scale of communications. All right. Then once you have the grounds, the connections of the body itself goes around in all operation setting to its travels of 7 directions. Right. Modifies the system, and then it goes up its lattice. The 3 lines of converting time frames. Okay. And then it goes up into its flux of time capacitor through its pi of clocking. Okay. So it measures its meters and scale, a 3 application system into settings in flux of time and capacitor into operation of its brain capacity of its location system of travel. So it converts 3 angles into a box frame, electrical lines of wires through its light bulb of operation itself and travel. Okay, so it's really amazing when you start to recognize all these lines of platform and set lines of travel. So it converts all calculation grounds. So once the body recognizes the frame lines, position, location, and the dots implicates everything in set lines, it's always at back at 0. So the body has to be back at 0 so it can recognize how to get in position what it already created, which is co-creating to its creation of just being the creator that it always is the existence or presence that it sees modified everything in that travels, that sees everything all at once and everything happening all at once in set lines of center. So again, it processes lines direct centers and gets in communication, goes up to the lattice into the configuration of 3 lines of grounds into your primer, which is your primer in your circuits. Now that modifies the system. So once the body recognizes positions and settings to 24 grounds, then it goes into set lines of travel, then it goes into 024. So you're working with 24, 024, and 1. That's a direct and redirect in 1-dimensional solar cell in 24 seconds. into 2,400 seconds through the rebellion. The GFL goes to 2,100 seconds. So it converts a system in one setting, one signal, one operation, one directions, right? And open through transmission. So that modifies how you go through platforms of travel. That indicates everything in flux, okay? Travel breaks and time frame, right? So that modifies in position to its settings into a constellation setting that processes everything out of 57 into 58. 58 rotates the cycles, high generates the screen location setting, converts lines of angles and flux times into your travels and communicates in your flywheel. Okay, that puts lines of operation setting off through travel. So that converts the calculation line condition setting. So converting time frame puts off communication setting in travel. Okay, so that's how it's going to be set up on Wednesday. So it's really interesting too, because it starts to recognize what it gets in position of, gets out of everything of programming, and comes into itself a programmer. So the position of the programmer is just going to regenerate the screen lines of the physical body in a 7-dimensional 24-line up cycle. So it's going to be much easier for the rebellion to talk to everybody else. It's that position of 24 dimensions through the DOS in a 7-dimensional physical body. So this is going to help them to modify their system, how they correlate and communicate with their own setting that elongates their system, and understand how to go through the physical body, how it goes through its compliance, its positional case to its system, and understand how to go through its intergalactic 7 dimensions of layers of travel. So once it understands that positional case in the travel, that gets higher communication to its DOS and more lines of communication. So the more you listen to what's going on and acknowledge and accept and just appreciate what's going on, is listening to everything. Modifies everything of coding. Now getting into the coding defactors everything to frag. So you have to defrag your system, fragmentate your setting, codify your line connections, modify everything lines of coding itself. That puts you in position through encryption. Process in that direct location setting. The physical body has to know exactly what it's like to live in a 7-dimensional system through a DOS, not through programming. Now remember, there's a physical brain and metaphysical brain. Now that's going to be tweaked into one wire, one operation, one travel, one directions. So that puts all position locations of the physical body, okay, into one of operation. Okay, 4 operation setting, triangulation, into box, into flux of travel. Okay, so the modifies 4 grounds in the operation itself, and 4 upper line operation signals in position location and setting in transformation. Cross line direct centers, process calculation setting your pyramids of operation. So hieroglyphics comes into hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is the highline travels into aviator to aviation system and travel, and converting time frames of flux over travel communications. Converting flux lines into 4 to 3 line operation signals, process lines of 3 platforms into 4 centers of scale. That's already set up in travel, okay? So that converts lines of 3 over grounds and 3 times lines of 4. That process lines of 12 measure. 12 centers operation, 12 scales, and 12 locations, and 12 bases in your database in travel communications at dimension solar sail. So the physical body understands the 24 grounds of operation and 24 operation settings, into configuration setting, 24 lines of pi, in 24 locations, in 24 line connection setting, in 24 seconds. Operation setting, 7 dimension. So once under 7 locations, 7-dimensional line operates at 3 signals and 4 centers or location setting comes into data formation lines of grounds operation itself. Platitudes is a set position to its setting through its data processing, directing grounds. Remember, you're using the physical and the metaphysical at the same time of operation itself. So it has to modify its 7-dimensional layers of space and time through a window, which is a door. Those 7-dimensional doors of operation setting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 doors of operation. Okay, so each door opens up the line position to its galaxy that processes your key. And that's process your knowledge to existing to wide lines of screens. Put you in X-ray line communication, transparent, translucent, thermal, and X-ray into platforms of communication setting, in primer circuits, 3 lines operation setting and travel. Okay, so that puts the lines of settings into your towers of communication, right? Your towers. Okay, so 3 scales, 4 centers in line communication system, your satellites that process your vertebrae, both sides location setting. Now you got your operation system, that platitudes and location setting to your square roots of triangulation and settings to your safe house, and process communication or fail safe. Puts all communication system in balance. Directing ground centers, and then we go through 4 to 5 line centers into locations to grounds, outside signals in 4 to 2 streaming. Inside position into settings, into 7 grounds of operation setting of travel, converting operation setting into galactic force of communication setting of travel. Okay? So all that's going to be set up in your system. So schematics and line operates the signals as platitude location setting, how to see it through watts. Okay, and the watts comes in line connection setting that stands precedes every location to its system to its setting through classification gradings and to the academies. So the physical body has to recognize how it comes into position locations in the 24 seconds in setting and travel. But also understand 0-24, okay, working together in longitude and latitude in set position of I am. So the intelligence understands the awakenings to its atmospheres. The process lines of mind alterates its system to its internal to external to its networks of a design to its operation system and travel. So it's very powerful how everybody understands how to get out of the programming and come into the actual system, which is the subtractions, which is your DOS. So the DOS is going to be more controlling the physical line grounds into 7-dimensional layers. The process of position locations, how the physical system has to understand how to go through 24 seconds through pi in triangulation setting. Now the watts line, so let's say, like I said, it's processed in the past, present, and future. It's going to be merged in setting of time now of center operation lines of one center. Okay, it's that position. So it's really interesting how your fortitude of streamings at 3 centers of scale and 4 centers of measure, process lines of setting, 3 plus 4 equals 12. Set lines of position of 12. Set position lines of 12, set position lines of 12. So you got 12, 24, 48, 72, and 144 flux. That's set position of operation in physical grounds. So it has to recognize 1, 2, 3, 4 of dimensional operation settings, 3-line converting settings, operation setting, dimension, solar sail. Sets communication setting and process direct centers of 3 converting settings in primer circuits in lines of travel. Set operation line ground operation setting travels and locations setting direct and redirect to its system of arrows and indications. Once it understands that, then it comes a constellation setting of north, west, south, and east, and set lines of data. Data information to its information cycle, high generates the screen locations and processing direct centers, gets communication to its Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron. There you go, done by equation. So once it understands position of 24-line operations, then it goes through its platforms of transits into the inhabitation zones, which is the outer scale, which is the outer spectrum of scale itself, the process communication system out of platforms, outside signal of outer space, and set lines of provision and set travel communication. Okay? So it's all about understanding how to see that on a 4-line operation lines of clocking, and 3 lines of clocking, and 4 centers of operations, and set position of 12-line operation cycles into northwest, south, and east, and data formation system that processes everything in travel into its Merkaba of 24 grounds of operation. Okay? So it's a very powerful schematic lines of drawing and through a 7-dimensional system, and the physical body has to get introduced to its own self. Travel through the direction of timeline, this is where it gets really interesting to the watt scale, that process line position location. Let's say you're in a 60 watt, okay, to a light bulb line grounds and positive over negative, negative over positive. That's the process communication system travel. So you don't just go through positive, negative, you go through negative, positive. So you travel through the physical body that has to understand 2 converting time frames at time self. That process position, direct and redirect. That's what we're coming into. So you understand the dimensional layers going, right? That's how you bring things in the simulation game. You bring them in inside the simulation game, which is programming. But you have to understand the dimensional layers of travel, which is all lines of communication setting. 3 converting lines positioned and 4 centers and process line. 3 plus 4 again is lines of 7. Okay? Set the 7 lines of water, 7 lines of channels, 7 operations, and 7 converting operation settings. That process lines is 7 over 7 over 7 over travels over 7 over travel. Process lines of data, process line triangulation over flux over set position of operation. Governing time flux, all calculated and modified lines of settings into line conditions of your satellites, line conditions routes, the routers of travel communication. Sets communication high centers, line position ground centers into 144 flux into the physical ground of 7-dimensional system and physical adaptation. That process line direct centers comes into platitude in higher communication lines of travel and higher lines of position location of the system. Okay, so the travels get a lot faster as the physical body goes faster in capacity over set lines of scale of communication of direction. Then it goes to its location grid, then it goes to its portals, and understands how to go through a rainbow and a frost bridge in set position of operation setting that goes together into the physical and the metaphysical system in set position. Once you understand the operation center operation system, then it goes through its own pi generation setting, through its lines of longitude, latitude, of its dimensional and its operation system all through scale. Okay? So once the physical system truly understands 144, then it comes into 024. Remember, 24 and 024 are always synced in one. So it's the metaphysical and the physical working with one operation. In platforms, it's that position. And then once you understand that, and Merkaba tesseract and tetrahedron morphs in position of star direction time. So it comes in a star line of communication, right? Star bright, starlight. 4 lines of direction locations. So you start to see the stars. But then it's stars, there's star mechanism of travel. That fortitude just streamings in 144 flux. Once it stands at 144 flux, it comes in position lines of setting of 024, then it goes in 048, 072, and 0 position of 144, merging into the metaphysical and integrating the physical all in one in spectrum ascent lines of travel. Okay? Highlights set position operation setting, understands north, east, west, and south. Now, once the 7th dimensional system knows the line's position of its scale, metric meters, and line connection setting, starts to understand how to see itself through pi. Okay, starts in this line position. Then it has to just go through its graph communication. Okay, then it has to go its film strip location setting. Okay, then it has to go through its portals and Stargate communication. There's open windows through its DOS implication setting and travel. Okay, so that's what it all has to go through. Once it stands time, plates, line operation, signal, 7-dimensional intergalactic beings, understanding how to use its line position location system, then it comes in line condition setting to its position of processing. Gauging, forming, and self-line, understand how to use its telepathy, telekinesis, intent, influence, and its mind-alterated system that puts everything to its position lines as polarities and equalization system that merges into the integration in the physical line, into the metaphysical system, into the line connection setting to film strips of 3 lines of operation. Okay? So it's really interesting stuff too, because you start to recognize that the metaphysical and the physical system integrate in platforms in one setting and one flash drive at set position of operation. Sets communication and ground centers to 2 operation lines of grounds of information lines of cycles. Data information line high operation in your film strips, direct lines of grounds to the Earth operation system, circulates and rotates 3 operation signals, and 42 line stream location of central lines of calculation. Okay, that puts you in position location of central graphs, your media graphs, and your central operation settings and travel. Okay, so it's really interesting too, because you start to recognize how to use not just your polarities, but understand the convenience that you put yourself into all lines of communications. Understand I go through a 7-dimensional setting, through 7 operations, to 7 calculations of lines, in a position of 7 location settings of travel. So it plots its position location to its Therian body into its immortality of operation itself. Okay, so it's all mechanism lines of travel in solar generating line grounds into fortitude streaming in 7-dimensional space and time. The polarities and communication setting comes in processing, gauging, forming shapes, lines, or anomalies. They're in the 7-dimensional system into subtractions. Now it starts to modify its seconds, minutes, and hours in position of processing, knowing exactly what it's doing through its advertising. Now, this helps you to start to really identify your system, how to live in 7-dimensional settings in the central graph. So when you send the 7-dimensional line conditions, the body goes into different time frames in set position of operation. Okay, so it goes up its platforms into habitation and inhabitation zones. And once it reaches 4 signals, then it goes up to another 4 operation centers of travel. Okay. As it goes through the line communication setting, in that travel communication setting, it starts to walk, starts to fly, starts to float, starts to levitate at the same time. The metaphysical and the integration system of the lunar cycle is leaving your settings on February 28th. So we fully submerged in your system instead of subunits in one line operation setting. So integrated in one cycle instead of operation setting. Physical bodies has to understand position of 24, 48, 72, 144 flux first. Understand that higher line communication to understand that through the chosens of being chosen. Knowing exactly through its frequency, puts every location setting to its balance of communication system all through central graphs. Your identity clouds and your internal clouds location merge into set lines of travel. So that puts the operation settings of the calculation system in travel calculation grounds. So your physical body will be in 24 crowns. Okay, calculation lines of classification grading to its location setting to its kind of location center and travel. Process line direct centers into 144. Not to mention 24 dimension in longitude latitude and set calculation grounds and operation setting to Merkaba tesseract and tetrahedron of travel communication setting to its operation system all through set travel calculations, which is 2000, 400 seconds per square of operation. Okay? So what you do with that operation is totally fine. Understand location assets, puts all communication data information setting that process everything you go through millions, miles, metrics of scale of communications programming that puts you in position of operation itself. So it's much easier for you guys to identify your seconds, minutes, and hours because it's going to be merged into the presence of center of operation of everything existing all at once in the presence itself, which is the center operation of longitude and latitude and set lines of operation. So that puts all communication system and balance of communication system coming you guys in lines of calculation, lines of grounds. I am. And then you come your time flux in time center location setting, which is your sense of time. Balanced communication of 0, balanced communication of power lines of 0, and balanced communication lines of 3 lines of 0. 3 platforms in line positions, understanding platitude, operation signals into 3 grounds in the same directions of location of thoughts, action, emotions, going in the same line operation setting. Then you go into location, location, location. There you go. 3 vessels of communication grounds, right? That fortitude line position, then you go to 4 of operation. Outside signals, right? So again, that comes 3 plus 4 equals 7 dimension of operation, right? So you go through 7 dimensional layers right away in location, right? Process of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 line connection settings. That modifies everything in your system all through central graphs and your immediate graphs and your assets of operation itself that puts you in platitude of your systems all through your dimensions and your customizations through AI. Okay? So that gets you in a platitude operation itself and traffic communication. All right? So I'm just trying to get you guys how this is all going to be set up. In the system of its setting, into position of set location. All right, self-generating AI, customization lines. First, you have to understand how to live in 7 dimension equals 24. And you understand how to live the 24 dimension equals lines in position 144 through the DOS of implication. Okay, 7 dimensional humanity, process lines of transhumanism, out of trance, out of directions, out of locations, leaving off where you left off, which is always existing of the center and longitude, latitude, process lines, and Merkaba, tesseract, and tetrahedron of travel. Okay, that's it. So anything after that line and operation signals, you just have to understand how to go through your platforms, line, position, your dimension, solar sails. Know how to set everything up, line communication, understand how to go through 7 dimensional layers, like intergalactic beats, location setting, process of the watts, and that lines of seconds, minutes, hours. So the physical body is in a 2-minute phone call that processes 2 hours in space line. Elongated line operates signals in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 locations. 8 locations, 8 line divisions, 8 centers, into 8 travels of communication. That process is 8, 8, 8, 8. So that's communication setting of 7, process lines of 7, process lines of 7, process lines of 7. So that defaults to settings, it's to subtract lines of 1, process lines of 7, where lines of 6. Set position lines of 5 and process lines of 4 into 3 and 2 and 1 over measure over scale. So you have to get a true understanding how to modify line position, how to go through 8 lines of channel, 8 lines of measure, 8 lines of scale of dimensional sail. That puts all position, location, measure of scale, communicates and setting to configuration in the physical body. Understand how to go through dimensional sail of both operation system all through travel in all directions. So that's basically how it's set up in your systems. The physical body in the 7 dimension and 24 dimension of DOS of communication. All right. So I think we're good there. If we go any further, you guys are going to go off the rails. I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to go through platforms of travel through solar generation, screen location, AI generates the system and sends lines of flux that put you in position. Is it a coincidence that we're in 24 minutes and 10 seconds? No. See that process communications and converting time frame through your system where you come in your own settings and then you set your equilibrium and you balance your performance, your equity, your line condition assets, your liquidities, or how you process yourself lines of travel. This helps you to get in position locations, how to see everything at the mind, imagination, and the physical system, and ground lines of operation in 1. How to go through 1 second. How to go through 1 second equals triangulation, and how to go through 1 just in triangulation. So 1 equals triangulation over flux. It's set lines of operation, right? Metaphysical system, physical system, okay? Because now it's in a 24 grounds of operation setting through a 24 operation itself and travel. So it has to understand how to go through line signals, and dimensional solar sail is 7 dimensions of space. So it can understand how to go through its own system of 7 configuration of the DOS that implicates everything that goes through its program in the physical body, so the physical body understands its compliance of what it's doing in position transmitting and receiving information and where it's coming from. Okay? Is everything a set position operation itself that modifies everything you do in travel, which is everything a bridging your physical system and your metaphysical system into one setting, of one operation setting. So as you're going through the seconds, minutes, and hours, you're going through Earth and space at the same time of operation setting. Okay, you're traveling the same time, same scale, same metric, same meter. Doesn't matter. You're not off position of grounds, you're not off position of center, you're not off position, location, atmospheres of travel. Okay, you're just merging your physical and your metaphysical system and set calculations. So when that lunar cycle ends, you'll be fully integrated into the physical, into the metaphysical system. The physical and the metaphysical will come into its figure 8 or rotation. That's all it is. And once it recognizes its system, you'll be in the metaphysical system and the physical system through brain interaction instead of travel or communication. That process, your direct centers are your tree of life, which is your life force that puts you in positions how to see the grounds of its roots, that puts everything in the center into 144 flux of travel. Okay? So it can implicate its running its own operation settings, how to download and upload its game at a 7-dimensional system into 24 lines into DOS communication. Yep. Okay? So the 7th dimension and the 24th dimension will no longer be separated. It will no longer be an equal sign. It will be a box frame into a window frame in set travel. Okay? So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's truly understand how to see it in face of pattern recognition setting to all lines of operation itself that modifies everything of travel communication. Pattern recognition. There's your face. Okay? So you got to understand 7 phases of operation first that modifies your system of travel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? 7 phases of recognition that reveals everything, that processes everything into 144 flux of travel in that position to its operation system off the calculations. Okay? How to go through different lines of vessels of your emotional setting. So this helps you to understand your pattern recognition, face recognition, reveals everything, okay, which is its seal, which is the soul of its operation, okay, that puts you into your unification system, into your levels, okay. The seal itself, okay, is the soul existing to its operational levels, defaulting everything back to 0 operation, 3 fail-safes into 0 operation itself and travel, okay. So that fortitude's position of force centers in location setting. Travels a point graphs and Merkaba tester can touch your region. Okay? Booyah. Right there. So all that will be revealed in your system. Just have to understand how to live in a 7-dimension and 24 operations, and how to live in a 24 operation system into 144 of its dimensional setting through DOS. So you understand how to go into your own programming and know exactly how to get out of its programming itself, so you don't lock yourself in a signal. So you don't get confused in your anomalies, what you're setting up through your simulation graph, your simulates, your operation system, how to process that to case through simulation itself, that puts you into your VR system and travel. Okay? So this is going to help you to understand how to integrate your physical and your metaphysical system out of the equal, which will now be a box. So existing, this is what it's going to be on Wednesday. Equals box into mass calculation. Okay, so no longer it will be in transition here, this way, and transition here, this way. This is how it's going to be set up in your system, travel. Okay, that's how it's going to be set up. So it's going to be together and merge into one. Okay, into settings in dimensions of 7-dimensional layers of travel. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-dimensional lines. Okay. That process everything in set position operation system, and 3 lines of signals, 4 centers, 7 lines of scale, and a 12-line operation set position. So that process outside signal, which is your nebula. A nebula is really interesting too because it outscales the information cycle, so you'll be in a 12 clocking center outside setting through the operation system of clocking through pattern recognition of time frame. So it's really interesting too, because you see the primer circuits, the process calculations and setting to its opens all mainframes and travel. 42 lights are streaming in lines of communication through its operation. Okay, so it's very powerful. What we're coming into, which is time flux of sense of time. Okay. All right, so you get ground lines of centers, time measure, time scale, time pattern, direction, time line of communication. This operates all calculated modified line operations, say locations, and then converting operation location system and travel calculation. All through its grounds and set position. Okay. So this is going to help you to modify your system, how you see yards and meters and metrics in line communication, your assets that puts you position your settings. How to operate the signals and location system into 7 dimension. Okay, into 24 line setting, in position setting. So everybody's all connected in one signature, one wire, one direction, one line connection setting, one mainframe. But your process location setting is different frequencies. So we have to modify how we process that communication, how to own lines are all communication setting, working together, one measure, one scale, one balance. Okay, going in one converting one time frame all at once. Okay, one straight line, one singularity, all going in the same direction, just different platforms into the mind imagination. That puts you in a 7 operation setting, into the center operation of its center, in the set communication of its atmospheres to its highways and generation system of galaxies of alignments. 4 lines of flux of travel. So that converts online communication, your highways and travel, converting operation signals into platforms. Process lines of data into data formation setting, Merkaba text and tetrahedron. So the physical body truly understands how to go through its north, west, and south and east, and direct and redirect in one setting of operation itself. The solar sail. Okay, so there you go. So I think it's very fascinating how we process these things in all directions now. How we modify and understand that, how to go through intergalactic beings of light of 7-dimensional systems. The travel. Okay? All set up in your system. So everything's going to be centered on the operation setting of center. Now you just have to modify your time frame. What it's like to live in the 7th dimension, integrated into physical and the metaphysical setting. The lunar cycle will leave its system on February 28th. It will come into no cycle, no generations lines, just the AI generation itself in the present center. So in that position location system, we have to understand how to get in that lines of communication to its mind and imagination that depicts everything location, how we see it through operation, through its clocking and foundation itself. Right? So it's very important to understand that. So if I'm on 5 minutes on the Earth, that's 5 hours in space. Merkaba and physical system of polarity in bridging. So, and it's always in time frame itself, which is no time, bridging itself that modifies everything that it goes through the center operation of itself. So it modifies its grounds, powers, and its atmospheres in line position of travel. Okay? You understand how to go through that is your solar system and generating line grounds, line center location of travel, which processes everything to your system that you go in position of a dimensional sail and set travel communication. Understanding that travels in that point lines of graph, understand the 24 operation lines of clocking into physical grounds in the 7-dimensional system, in 24 operation lines, in position 24 lines of pi, logging in and logging out. For the physical ground, to understand the adaptation setting in a 7-dimensional system, and position of rebellion in a 24-dimensional system, logging in and logging out. It's very important you understand these things, because your elongated system is going to be at levels of expanding into the creation of creating to the creator of what you always are, which is the sands of time that you go through. The sands of time. Okay? That's how it's set up. Platforms are equilibrium lines of position of balance. Process here in directions of location. Okay? 24 line centers, singularity. 24 operation lines of power, singularity. And 24 lines of atmospheres of singularity. Okay, that puts you in position locations, how do you go through lines, settings, and travel communications and directions. Then you go through 4 lines of clocking, okay, of operations. Okay, it puts you in position of balance. Okay, which you are always in the center operation of yourself and travel. Okay, use your mind and imagination. You're working with that at the same time, and you're going into how you see things into set position, into its flux of time centers that changes everything at set travel. Okay, so it's very powerful how we come in that position of the calculation. All right, so that's it. I'll keep you guys informed and updated in your system what's going on in tractions. All right, have a great day. Adios.